right, Bethany Albertson, thanks for being here. A lot of your research has been about politics and the use of anxiety and negative emotion. Tell us a little bit about that research and where you're going with it.
So we start by just noting that, and I should say from the get-go, this is co-authored work, noting that some of the most famous political ads, the Daisy ad from LBJ, the Willie Horton ad in the 1988 election, are ads that have an emotional component. Specifically, those inspire anxiety or fear. And for us, anxiety is a really interesting emotion from a psychological standpoint. Anxiety is the emotion that says, stop, look around, all is not well with the world. And anxious people learn. From a democratic perspective, this seems like a really good thing, especially when you note that Americans in general have very low levels of political knowledge. So if anxiety kind of shakes us up and says, pay attention to contemporary circumstances, gather some facts, that seems like a good thing. Where my co-author and I come at this is to say, well, politicians are using anxiety, and we think they're using it strategically, maybe not because they expect it to make us better informed, but because they expect to persuade us with fear. And so we come at it from that standpoint.
And so how do you simulate that in a way that echoes the real campaign experience?
We have a couple of different methods for it. The closest to the real campaign experience would be to take a political ad. For instance, in one set of experiments we take a Pete Wilson ad on immigration. We make a more anxious version of it and a less anxious version of it. Now, the more anxious version of it is kind of like the real ad. It has threatening music, threatening visuals. The less anxious version of it adds neutral visuals and less emotional music. We can compare the way people react to these two ads, knowing that both groups saw the same information about immigration. Both groups have been thinking about immigration, but one group got the more anxiety-producing version of the ad.
Now, anybody that's watched political ads or been subjected to them, which is almost everybody now, knows that these are fairly common techniques, and we see this a lot. How are we seeing sort of anxiety twinged themes and advertising playing out in the 2012 campaign?
My favorite anxiety-producing political ad so far in 2012 was a web ad from Santorum's campaign, was Obamaville, which painted this kind of bleak post-apocalyptic vision of what the world would be like if we had 4 more years of the Obama presidency. And it was particularly cinematic in the way it appealed to people. In a more kind of common example, you can think of anti-immigration rhetoric in the 2012 Republican primary, which is no different than what happens in the 2008 primary in terms of politicians kind of fighting with each other in terms of whose policies were going to attract the most immigration and who's the toughest.
So how do you expect to see this play out as the general election campaign unfolds later in the year?
So both parties know that fear can be persuasive. If on the Republican side, they're going to play out economic fears, which we don't need a politician to tell us. It's reasonable to be afraid or anxious about the economy. Of course, a strategic campaign is going to remind us of that often. On the left, you can think of the current framing of the war on women as being a strategic attempt to incite fears among the electorate. Now, our purpose isn't to say that this is disingenuous or false. There are real things to be afraid of out there. Our purpose is really to say, okay, when candidates do this, what's the effect?
And it's one of the hallmarks, I guess, of a negative campaign. I think we think of negative campaigns as being negative about people, but no one party has a corner on trying to trigger negative emotions.
Absolutely. No one party. We can think about the parties and we can think about the candidates. And we should also think about the super PACs and all the outside money that's going to be in this election. I think we have potential for lots and lots of scary ads.
Well, I'd say we're looking forward to that, but I guess not. Thanks a lot for being here, Bethany.
Thank you.